The next theme for today's podcast is functional and space-saving design. So, do you have any kind of innovative ideas for us to maximize, our small apartments or our small living spaces? Any kind of design hacks or tricks or any tips that you can help us to kind of maximize our storage solutions, because we all struggle with storage. Come on.
Yeah, I think storage is key, especially in small homes. I live in a small apartment myself, so I'm quite familiar with it and trying to make the use of space. So I think this probably multifunctional design is a really key part. So typically we think of large open spaces and interiors as something that only maybe the chosen few can afford. But if we have more and more open plan spaces that can be adapted to different functions, so just like we've had forever people maybe using a dining table to work on at some point to study on, the more we can consider multifunctional designs, then we don't need so many different spaces. The fewer spaces we have or the fewer rooms we have at home, then maybe the more we can afford to do other things. The less spaces we have to decorate, to heat and clean and so on. So we can free up time, we can free up money. And if we really use good, imaginative, creative, multifunctional design, one room can serve so many different functions at different times of the day. So we've got play spaces, relaxing spaces, work, exercise spaces, can all go on in the same space. And appreciate sometimes it's nice to go into a different space, or it's nice to go outside to do different functions. But when the space is limited, I really think by using flexible furniture and fixtures, so anything that can be moved, anything that's portable or collapsible, sliding walls, for instance, operable walls, so we can hide things away. So for instance, if we've got a desk that we use to work at in a bedroom, if we can move, if we can disguise, if we can conceal that working area at some points in a day, the space will feel more relaxing. So just having the equivalent of one large sliding door to partition off a certain area of the room, although it's going to make the room feel slightly smaller, if we design it well, we can really hide that function until we want to see it, especially for workspaces. So I think having a large amount of storage, using every space you can for storage and clever storage as well. So if we take the idea of a small house over 2 floors with a stair, a traditional closed staircase, there's a huge amount of storage space that can be used under there. But very often we just have a short door to it, and then it's an open space, and that space can be difficult to get to. Maybe if we design that space far better, we could have pull-out drawers, just like we'd have maybe a large unit, a kitchen, or even like a safe kind of racks that pull out, or small compartments, whether it's open shelving, cupboards or drawers. All of that volume of space can be used for storage rather than just the space on the floor that we typically use, and maybe a couple of shelves on the wall.
I think these are really great insights. The amount of time you kind of relook at your house, or you go into someone else's house. Normally your eyes open up when you go into someone else's house and you think, oh, they could have used this space slightly differently, and you start giving suggestions and you think, wait, hold back, let me go back and do the same at my house. And then, oh yeah, I can now, change the functions of a particular room. Like you say, you can have an area for children's play and an area for exercise, but it's all the same area. And, at the end of the day, you just put all the toys in the box and you can't see anything anymore. It's now an adult space. And I like those kind of multifunctional spaces. You don't have to have the biggest house in the world. You can have a small space. A house is your home, and as long as you feel comfortable within those spaces, then, you are increasing the quality of life. But there is a lot of wasted space, attics, for example, not being utilised, or under stairs, like you mentioned. But there's a lot of clever little bits and bobs out there nowadays as well. I feel like they're competing with each other as to who can, you've got those rotating storage things that I see everywhere now, that you can have in your cupboards and on your fridges and those kind of things that can help you save on space within a compartment as well. So it's not necessarily within the open space either.
That's right. And transportation's another great way of getting influence about designing small spaces, especially with storage. When we look at boats, mobile homes and so on, any kind of nomadic life, when people need to carry what they have with them, there are always ways of having incredible ways of storage, and also anywhere else with a densely populated area. So we take Tokyo in Japan, there's incredible apartment designs in Tokyo, because typically, similar to maybe Manhattan and London, where the prices are so high, because there's a small amount of land with a hugely dense very dense population, that the designers really have to focus on maximising every space, every piece of the volume of the space, so we can really see some great work done there, and we can hopefully learn from it.
You can see that innovation comes from where we're desperate, really, to know. Where the need is. So, innovation is something that has come out and sprung out from difficult situations. And so that's helped a lot of designers, like I mentioned, in Tokyo there. We'll get into this next part, or next theme of this podcast together, where we're talking about designing for wellness. And we'll go back into talking about global design as well. But designing for wellness, there's a connection between interior design and well-being that we've established. But there's also connections between biophilic design, which I know you're passionate about and encourage, but also kind of natural daylighting and air quality. Just talk to us a bit more about what biophilic design is, so that we can understand that a bit more.
Yeah, I'd say it's improving connections with nature. So bringing nature into interior spaces, or at least visual connections with nature, even just outside of the interior spaces. So we see lots of planting the last few years, especially again since we were told to stay at home so much. The sales of houseplants went through the roof. And that's one good way of looking at it. Plants can give us other qualities, so it's not just about decoration. It's about maybe improving indoor air quality. It's about those visual connections with nature. And there's a lot of research that tells us having a constant visual connection with nature can help us to relax, can help us to focus. So school design, hospital designs have looked at these things for years. That's why we'll often see those visuals connections there.
You talk about nature, but, and natural plants, etc. What do you think of all of these fake plants? Because they seem to have popped up everywhere. Is this kicking off the same psychology?
I think, so I wouldn't really link it to biophilia. Just my perception of biophilia is about the natural environment. But it can do a good job. Some of the look of natural plants, of artificial plants now has developed so much that it's really hard to tell the difference from a distance. We've seen some recent interesting projects in Manchester. There was one, the Ivy restaurant, where the designers have got a huge amount of planting outside the building. All of the plants that are within arm's reach are real, and then the plants that are higher up, further away, are artificial. So you can see the kind of the sense of doing that. If they're further away, they're harder to maintain, they're harder to get to. But yeah, it's very, I think if we're using artificial plants, and it is just decoration, because really they're all plastic plants, so they can look great. And I think they can trick us. They can still give us a feeling maybe of relaxation, because there's lots of design tricks where we do like to trick the eye, like the trompe-l'oeil idea. So there's nothing wrong with maybe using a plastic plant, as long as we're thinking, how long can that plastic plant last? We don't want it to be a short-term thing. And is the plastic recyclable? Can it be used for a different use afterwards? But certainly some of the faux plants, the artificial plants, do look more genuine than they used to. But in terms of biophilia, I think it's more about bringing natural elements in, whether it's planting, whether it's rocks, whether it's water, air, looking at, like you mentioned earlier, air quality. And
so rocks can also make a person feel more relaxed?
I believe so. Again, this can be very personal, and maybe it depends on our genetic knowledge, our upbringing, our lifestyle, our own passions and so on. But I think so. If we look especially at Japanese design, traditional Japanese gardens where there's so much moss, so much rocks, gravel, raked in different directions. Often some people will call them Zen gardens, so therefore the function is to relax. So I think, there's a lot of evidence, a lot of examples, case studies around the world that show that they do. And people have chosen to have these things in the gardens for so long, and appreciate if you're lucky enough to have a garden, they'll probably be much more natural in the garden. For us people living in the centre of Manchester, it might not be so appealing, it might not be so realistic. So if we can bring some of these things inside, and appreciate sometimes that we can create differences in indoor air quality, like humidity, which may have negative effects. But I think if it's something that's carefully managed, for instance, there's a shallow water pool at the Pompidou in Paris on one of the lower roofs, so you can walk out in that area. It's an outdoor space on a roof, but it's used as a sculpture garden. So it's just very shallow water, maybe only a centimetre or so over a tray. But these spaces can look incredible indoors as well. Imagine if you've got a shallow water tray with large stones or pebbles, then a tiny amount of water over the top, And if there's a pump attached, that water can be moving. The sound and look of moving water can be incredibly relaxing. And maybe with planting as well. I appreciate there's difficulties with shallow water. It can be very dangerous for young children, very messy for pets or lively adults. But if we can manage it, maintain it well, it gives us another choice and something else to consider of what we can put inside. And I think with many good residential projects as well now, we see so many kind of light wells formed in homes that are a kind of a conservatory, or doing the same kind of thing, a glass house for planting, so they can still maybe be open to the natural elements to get watered, but we can see them throughout the home and we can open a door to access them.
Yeah, these are incredible ideas and solutions to the spaces that we have, and I mean the kind of the touch and feeling side of biophilic design, where in places where there's therapy or where there's kind of the environment where there's rehabilitation or something, there's always some kind of biophilic design. There's always that water. There's always like you mentioned, those rocks and those sounds, those calming sounds. Almost you just need the birds tweeting and you feel like you're in a totally different place. I think all of that is natural in the way that we kind of form a feeling in the space that we are within. And you see that kind of design in hospitals as well, where you have the courtyards that not necessarily can you go into them, but you can see them.
Yeah.
And there's glazing, there's these like wells that you mentioned, and they are naturally watered, but you can see it and it makes you feel calm, rather than just seeing corridor after corridor that you see in hospitals nowadays. So yeah, I think that's really an interesting kind of perspective that we can look at design from within the kind of wellness, designing for wellness of the community, really, of the person. So let's go into our final topic together then, Tom, on this podcast, where we're talking about global design and global design influences. Have you had any projects, external to the UK that you thought, oh, that's an interesting concept. I've never had to deal with that before. Oh, that's, something different, or I would never have, put those two colours together, but you think, wow, once you have done that.
Yeah, I do think that interior design is a truly global profession. In my experience, at least, I've always only worked around Greater Manchester, but I've still been able to design projects in lots of different countries, and also work with so many designers from different parts of the world, even me just staying in Greater Manchester. So from those two perspectives, I'd say it's truly international. And it's part of my favourite thing of working in the profession. Makes your socialising after work so much more interesting. When you go out with 8 or 9 different nationalities together, we learn so much and kind of can play and joke about our own different lifestyles and upbringings and so on. And then working on projects internationally, we always learn so much. Very often we'll work with a local designer as well. So a client may recruit us, a British designer, and then maybe for the first few stages, and then for the latter stages when we need a designer on site, they may work also with a local designer. So by collaborating with those different design companies, we do learn so much about culture, lifestyle, and also preferences. So for instance, designing a home in Tuscany in Italy, realising that people are looking for the shade of the outdoor space or indoor spaces, rather than in England so much focused on where we can get warmth or sunlight. So really thinking about the site, the environment, and the people, the culture and so on can teach us so much. I remember once we got it quite wrong. My early days of designing for a company, we were designing retail, and we worked for a large multinational fashion company, and we had a rollout. So a rollout is where you design one concept store and then it gets rolled out to lots of different units, often in lots of different countries. Our rollout hit a Middle Eastern country, and the changing rooms, the curtains that you'd access the changing room to, maybe finished from the floor about so much. And it was a mistake of us. We should have thought about it earlier on. So when people were getting changed, their feet and ankles were on view, and that didn't match that culture at all. So it was a big mistake from our side. Luckily, it was just curtain fabric. So it was a quick thing to change in the first week of trading, but it's something that we should have realised at the start, but something you quickly learn from. Something about mistakes are great ways of learning. I like the way that we get the kind of modernist designers, Ray and Charles Eames, for instance, incredible designers who really learn design through playing, through experimentation, And then we need to be real about our kind of failures, our issues, our problems we come across, but not seeing them as a big negative, seeing as something that we can learn from.
Absolutely. There's no failure. It's either success or we learn, as I've been told. So I think that's the best way to look at that. And like you say, there's culture differences. There's even culture shocks. There's something that even within the same culture, you might do things in different ways because that's, like you say, is the upbringing or it's the way that you've always done something. So there's always differences in that. But would you say which kind of industry would you say is the best that you worked in? Do you prefer the more European industries? Do you prefer the more kind of the Gulf region? Which one's the most interesting that you think, oh yes, if that project lands, I'm definitely taking up that project?
Yeah, I think I've always been quite enticed by Southeast Asia, and I've not done a lot of work in those regions, but especially what we see in Japanese design at the moment. There's some incredible, beautiful designs. Also, I believe in China, especially when we look at designs for young people, kindergartens, for instance. If you research online, some of the kindergartens, kind of play schools that have been designed around South Asia, Southeast Asia, are absolutely incredible, kind of wonderlands for children, places to play and experiment and learn from that way. But also hospitality projects, and traditionally Europe as well. I think especially the recent years of Scandinavian design being so popular, just coming from the basic utilitarian, maybe mid-20th century design, being so sound, so long-lasting, great longevity, using quite simple materials and quite simple layouts, what seems to have been so appealing to so many people. I'm a bit of a sucker for those too.
That sounds incredible. And to be honest with you, I think they've hit the nail on the head when it comes to school design, because that made me sound like I want to go back to school again. It made me feel like I want to go back to school again. So, how do we get those spaces to be more inclusive and more kind of playful, as you mentioned, when we're working with design, etc. Okay, well, thank you very much, Tom. These have been very, very insightful kind of pointers that you've mentioned to us today. So altogether, with all of the different podcasts that we've done together, Tom, we've spoken about designing for the future. We spoke about latest design trends, creative space makeovers, DIY and budget-friendly designs, color psychology in design. We've spoken about functional and space-saving design and wellness through design. And finally, we've just spoke about global design influences as well. Do you have any final comments, thoughts, or anything that you would like to kind of influence our listeners for today, Tom Nancollis?
Oh, that's a big question at the end. You've stopped me there. I'm not too sure. I think anybody who's thinking about designing should go for it. We work with so many in tuition, in education, so many people who want to change their career, many people who've had a good career, earned a lot of money in something, and then they want to do something more enjoyable. I think that's what we see in interior design a lot from designers, really. Very often, in my experience, people love their jobs. So anyone who can love the job, no matter what we're doing, I think are very, very fortunate people. So anybody who's thinking of getting into design, I'd really recommend they have a go. It's certainly not a job for young people. It's a job for anybody. I was told when I was at university that design's so difficult. Some of the best designers in the world are in their 80s or 90s. And we do see that, especially with architecture, because it can take so long. People's careers can be very, very long. And it's something, if people don't really choose to retire and carry on working, that suggests something's going pretty well.
I love that. So if you're looking into go into design, then do go into design. And, if you will love your job, it's because of the way that you kind of are influenced by your surroundings and by your clients and their clients' wishes as well. So thank you so much, Tom Nancollis, for going through interior design with us today and inspiring us to make our homes and living spaces and office spaces and commercial spaces much more of a delight to be in. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you all on the next podcast. Bye-bye from me.
Bye-bye for now.